So, I wanted to do a short video about a conversation or a discussion that unfolded on social media, in particular Twitter, over the weekend. And the topic was around the link or the absence of a link between childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences and the offending behaviour of people that make up our very expensive prison population. Now, the reason I wanted to do a video to share my thoughts, feelings and reflections is twofold really. The first being that I've worked in the youth justice system for around 15 years, predominantly working directly with children looked after and care leavers that enter the youth justice system, so obviously a group that have been disproportionately exposed to childhood adversity and trauma. And the second part is because I've had my own personal lived experiences of growing up in a house with a mum who was abused on various occasions and spent time in the care system. And because she didn't have her needs met, she was unable to meet mine and my siblings' needs as children. And that organically evolved into substance misuse issues for myself, and I was on and off of heroin and in and out of prison between the ages of 15 to 23. So this is an issue that's close to my heart, and so I thought I'd share my thoughts and feelings for those that are interested. Now, the first place to start when having this conversation, and I feel that people are conflating two different things that are slightly separate but also intrinsically linked, which is why this is a complex issue to discuss. And the first issue is about responsibility. And we need to outline that actually most people that have extensive knowledge of the criminal justice system through research or through practice fully understand and acknowledge that childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences are not a causal factor for offending behaviour. So we need to outline that in the beginning, and so we can park that after that. It's not a justification for people committing crime by any stretch of the imagination. The biggest place to look to identify that is through the care leavers and the care experienced individuals, actually, because although there is a disproportionality of care experienced people in all aspects of the criminal justice system, most people that enter care never get involved in offending behaviour or come into contact with the justice system, so therefore it is not a causal factor. So once we've identified that and parked that part of the conversation, we move on to the second part of the conversation, which is about intervention. So this is really important part because actually the criminal justice system is there to punish people, and it's also there to rehabilitate people. Now, those with insight into the criminal justice system know that risk needs responsivity is the theory that's underpinned the criminal justice system for the last few decades. And we won't go into that in detail, but what effectively that means is when an individual comes into contact with the criminal justice system, a practitioner, often a qualified practitioner, whether a probation officer, a psychologist, a therapist, etc., will do an assessment on that individual that incorporates all the factors in that person's current circumstances, but also the historical context. Now, that assessment then populates into an intervention plan. So the intervention plan will be targets objectives that are identified by that practitioner as being the most pressing things that need to be addressed, that reduce the likelihood of that person going on to offend and therefore commit crimes and produce further victims. So if it's been identified that childhood trauma or adversity is a driving factor behind someone's substance misuse issues, like say for me as a young person, that is something that needs to be addressed in the intervention plan to reduce the likelihood of that person going on to reoffend, to ensure that that individual understands what's driving their behaviour. And that could be the same as if they are gravitating towards other people that have been through similar experiences and are producing the similar behaviour. If you want to help that person move on from that behaviour, you've got to help them understand what's the driver behind that behaviour. And so therefore I think we're conflating these two separate things, and we're creating an argument that doesn't need to be had. Childhood trauma and adversity is not a causal factor for offending and doesn't justify offending. But if it's been identified as something that needs to be addressed to reduce victims, then it absolutely needs to be discussed and needs to be tackled within the criminal justice context to reduce further victims, making it a victim-led approach. They're my thoughts and feelings. Thanks for listening.